Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to give a quick keynote on the two pieces of code that we need to create the shared attribute base tables and all that, and how we're going to define these shared attributes using our abstract concept, how we're going to inject new columns and make sure that the data types are created. So let's get right into it. Hope you enjoy, and I will see you soon. All right, so in the last video, I was talking about, adding these shared attributes and how we are driving the data on the abstract side, but we left a giant space for columns. So what needs to happen is that when we create a new shared attribute domain junction relationship, I'm just going to call it a shared table. We have all the columns that we defined in that abstract piece, in that abstract shared attribute dataset type, but we have to fill in specific columns to that shared attribute. So name would have UDT name shared attribute, which is larger than the normal UDT name and has a specific purpose. And TBL ref event would have date ID, date time, and those would be like event date time, event date ID. And how we're going to do that is we're going to need two pieces of code. The create table, which is almost a duplicate again of our create table script, and the define shared attribute code. Now the define shared attribute code is going to allow us to pass some JSON in, create a data set under that shared attribute key name, and all of our definitions, make sure it's in our tables, all that good stuff. So before I go over those procedures, what I kind of want to show you is what we're looking at for the definition side of things. I did define my name like this. So I have a data point family of name, which will be the shared attribute place, a class of shared attribute, and following the same realms that are there. My shared attribute name is 250. And you can see that we have all of our definitions in here, like that expanded procedure that we created. For event, make sure to wrap it in array. We are sending JSON. Make sure we get that comma, but we can use concat function to keep our envarchar small, yet still make it readable. So I have dot event date as the data point I'm adding, date as the realm, shared attribute is the class, family is event because it is the shared attribute. We have event date for date, event date time for date time 2, and event date ID for big int. So the code that defines these shared attributes, it takes in a subject ID, which will be the shared attribute subject ID and that JSON that I was just showing. It needs the subject information, data set information, database information, and a lot of this stuff comes from the JSON or will get passed forward. So just getting the subject information for the subject ID, trying to pull a dataset type ID for the shared attribute key name. If it's null, we're going to get the family for our abstract path, and then create one using our new versioning procedure. And then we'll have this spit out, and if it's still null, we're going to raise an error. The next piece is doing the same thing for the data set, seeing if we can get a dataset ID for the subject name and dataset type. And if we can't, we need to create one. Now this dataset name is not going to look like TBL anything because it's not really a table. It's still a dataset. It's under the abstract piece. It doesn't really need to have a real name. We're not using it for that purpose. Data point cursor is opening the JSON that we are passing in using the with statement. Make sure we have our sequence, our data point name, and all of our classifications and SQL data types in case we need them, where we will be cursoring through that array and making sure to call that high-level data point type creator that we made with all the definitions and the realm class family type. Clearing out the data point ID and then trying to retrieve what we had just passed in. And if we can't get anything, that means this failed, so we're raising an error. Next piece is still in that cursor, making sure that that data point for that data set does not exist yet. And if it doesn't, we're going to create it using our new versioning procedure. And that's it for that definition. So just creating the data points, the data set, making sure our UDTs are there, and creating a new data set type if necessary. The create side of the shared attribute is, like I said, almost a copy paste from our normal subject data set create single. The difference is we're getting a subject ID and a subject ID parent. Now this subject ID will always be the shared attribute and the parent will always be the domain. And because when we are in our create all our higher level data set creation procedure, we want to make sure that if it's domain, for each shared attribute, run this. And if we're creating a new shared attribute for each domain, run this. So this will be our center for that information. Everything's the same, file groups, data point names, relationship types, subject names, the create table and nullable for the definitions and the definition process, looking for primary keys and foreign key parents. Our script is just as small, getting the database and other subject information for the shared attribute, just the name for the parent, database information for the database ID from the shared attribute, our templated dataset column that we created in the last video, our relationships, information, getting ready to call these procedures dynamically to get nullable information. We want the abbreviation for the parent and for the child, just because sometimes we have tokens in there. It really depends on what we're doing. Initializing the data point list, and what I was talking about in the keynote is we're going to get the abstracted template from the last video and the new JSON defined event or JSON defined shared attribute data set and data points, union them, and then order them by the sequence, because we only have, that 50 to 110, and we want all of our tables to appear to be the same. And then same thing from those other procedures is iterating through the data points, relationships for the nullable columns, dynamically calling that procedure, concatenating it to a list, getting it ready to replace. Our file group clusters are the ones with the null, or our file group names. We're not passing the version to it. The replacement, and finally executing it. I just have it printing right now. I did comment out the create version because it does not work in this procedure, how we're setting this up. And that is what is going to be happening in the next sprint. Sprint 6 is going to be 100% about tech debt. The next video that we're going to do is we're going to create a procedure that will allow us to send it a name, a process name, and then put this process in history or archive if we're deleting it or versioning it. And that's going to allow us to do what Sprint 6 is all about, minimizing the code. All this duplicated code, now we know exactly what we need, and I think it'll be good for the series to see how we can abstract all of this code into very reusable pieces now that we're here. We had to push and fight our way and do all sorts of bad master data management practices to finally get here. And now that we are here, we can actually put these all into the piece that they're supposed to be in, fit them into that puzzle. So that is it for this video. Because I was using, the versioning, this is kind of what our versioning information is going to look like now. We can see that I inserted, a name and some user-defined types. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. And remember, like this video and YouTube will recommend it to other users in our industry, and subscribe to support me. I'll see you next time for versioning procedures themselves. Have a good one.